Okay, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining this webinar on the Trafficking Analysis Hub. Please remember to mute your lines while the speakers are talking. If you have any questions that come to you during the session, feel free to jot them down in the Q&A or the chat box, or save them until the end, and we'll give you guys an opportunity to unmute your lines and ask any questions of the speakers. So this is a webinar run by the Mekong Club. My name is Phoebe Ewan. I'm Program Director for the Mekong Club. We are an NGO based in Hong Kong that focuses on combating modern slavery through engaging in a positive and collaborative way with the private sector. Now, much of our work involves very close collaboration, not just with the private sector, but with other NGOs, with government, with non-governmental agencies. And we really look to find ways to encourage greater sharing, greater collaboration, and tackling modern slavery by collaborating with various different groups. Now, today's webinar is an example of bringing such groups together, an example of such great collaborative work that can happen between NGOs, the private sector, and civil society. We're delighted to welcome our partners at the Traffik Analysis Hub, which is a project centered around data sharing to create a non-competitive and secure place where we can work together to better understand this global crime. Today, our speakers will present the Trafficking Analysis Hub project and also explain how your organizations can get involved and join in the community. We have three speakers today. We have Matt Friedman, CEO of the Mekong Club, Neil Giles, CEO at the Trafficking Analysis Hub, and Henry Maguire, a super user of the Trafficking Analysis Hub. Now, without further ado, Neil, if you would like to share your screen, I will pass over to you.
And then remember to unmute. Thank you, Phoebe, very much. Good day, everybody. I almost said good morning because Henry and I are both in England. But of course, that's not the situation where you are. Thank you for joining us today. We're here to talk about Traffic Analysis Hub. It's a long project. You've seen, I suspect, my CV and Henry's, our backgrounds. We've been on a journey for a long time to deliver this. We are an independent not-for-profit with a single mission, and that single mission, in a nutshell, is to make trafficking and exploitation so transparent through the availability of data that every actor in every sector can see it in its own context and then make a decision about how it engages with it. And we're on a journey that we've not completed yet, so we've got more to do. My background is law enforcement, 36 years with the UK globally as a law enforcement professional. I've spent time in most parts of the world in terms of investigations and ended up relatively senior. But I first came across trafficking and exploitation, and I hasten to add, didn't recognize it as such, when I was leading a small vice squad in Paddington in London in 1979, when the women who were selling sex on the street were trafficked from Northern Britain to London by their pimps and exploited for many months and sometimes years. I didn't recognize the crime, and indeed when I met Stop the Traffic, another NGO from which Traffic Analysis Hub has spun out in 2007, 2008, I didn't recognize the crime then either, neither did my agency. So we've come quite a long way in the last 13 and a half years. And as I sit and speak to you today, I just want to raise that this collaboration that Phoebe spoke about earlier is beginning to really gain momentum. And I just want to put right up front what we're calling Together is Stronger, and the website is togetherisStronger.net. It's It's an initial collaboration between these 4 organizations, Mekong Club, obviously, ourselves, Stop the Traffic, and the Noble in the USA. And we're working together with an initiative out front called Power of 10. It's about sharing 10 stories each to begin that process of breaking down some of those intellectual barriers that prevent us from sharing survivor stories. I'll continue and explain more. Pretty much everybody on this call will recognize this subset of the global analysis of the scale and nature of trafficking in persons. I've picked 25 million. It's suggested that about 20% of those are in commercial sexual exploitation. I think that's probably an underestimate. I think the whole figures are decent academic work and difficult to prove, of course, but the scale of exploitation across the globe is still a major problem, and one that I don't think we've managed to find the tools to address effectively as yet. And I hope the Traffik Analysis Hub is the beginning of a change to that. I put the 0.4% of survivors. All the data, we believe, suggests that about 1 in 5, so 20% of that 25 million, leave exploitation each year. So traffickers need to replace them. Less than 0.5% of that 5 million come into contact with authorities. And as a former representative of the authorities, I'm here to tell you that we're not very effective at sharing what we know with the wider world in ways that might help the situation. Trafficking and exploitation, I've come to accept, is a business, an economy in its own right. Quite a diverse business, but it's one that's relatively lucrative. It turns over something like 150 billion US dollars a year. Again, I'm going to put it out there. I think that's an underestimate, but it's the best number we have to work with at the moment. And pretty much all of that money goes through legitimate financial channels every year. It's hard to spot and even more difficult to stop. So it follows that whatever we do with data, with our work, needs to think about how we unbalance, knock off balance the economic cornerstones of trafficking and exploitation, and particularly how we help financial institutions spot and stop transactions associated with trafficking and exploitation. So just to try and crystallize this situation with you, this is where I will pose as a trafficker, someone involved in the business of exploitation, and just take you through my business model. So top left, I know that I need to replace 20% of my workforce each year. Now, if I've got 100 people in the UK, men and women who are contract labour, working on big agriculture projects in manufacturing, food production, construction, and related activity, I know that I'm going to need to replace 20 of those each year because I'm not a prison warder for the most part. My control mechanisms are that I would restrict access to money, restrict access to travel documents, inculcate a fairly healthy fear of authority, and also introduce a sense of debt into the equation. So that my bonds for those people are more psychological than they are physical. And also working with the opportunity that's presented to me by what I would describe as an odd version of the Stockholm syndrome, where people in exploitation actually become very loyal to their captors. In sex work, if I've got 5 women working in commercial sexual exploitation, in the UK, the monthly income for someone in sexual exploitation, around about £25,000 a month, if they're worked hard by their traffickers. So it follows that I would need to, if I had 5, I'd need to replace 1 every year. So I need a pipeline to a place that I know I can successfully recruit and get people to come on a journey, which is generally a journey of hope, a journey of expectation, because the victim is made to believe this is an opportunity to do well. It's only once they get to the other end of that journey, or some part of that journey, that situation changes. So that's how I managed my workforce. Top right, I'm in this for the money. I'm not in this for any other reason at all. And you could characterize this as I am a workforce boss that steals their income. Every penny that they make from selling sex or doing other labor, I steal. I might give them a small proportion of that back just to help me manage the environment, or to appear kind. But that's my work. I steal their wages, and then I need to be able to use that money effectively. I would generally look to send money home, and across borders is common. And I would need to make sure I remunerate the people that recruit for me and the people that help me manage my situation in the country that my crew are working in. And I need legitimate financial instruments to do that. I need banking facilities to pay for travel and to transfer money, and I need a credit card, etc., to be able to rent properties and to essentially have a real life. Bottom left, I am adept at maintaining and creating a demand for the products and services of the people I have in exploitation. So for sex work, I have a series of burner phones, and we manage a process whereby anybody that's ever been in touch with us will routinely get an SMS from us, trying to build up the sense of relationship between them and the women or men I have in sexual exploitation. And if I'm a contract labour provider, I would be adept at making sure that businesses knew that I was a good supplier of labour. I would have front companies. I would appear to be the very best work outfit, the most competitively priced. And then bottom right, very important for me, I need to keep my sense of risk at a manageable level. I'm pretty confident that if the police bust me and arrest me and take my victims off to some kind of debriefing process, they're not very likely to give evidence against me, because my reach goes right the way back to their homes and their families. So I'm pretty confident that prosecutions are low risk. So taking all of that together, it follows that whatever we do with data and analysis, we need to use it to begin to undermine each of these 4 important elements of my business equation. This is a quick overview of the costs of doing business. Most of these financial institutions and these fines weren't all for trafficking issues, although the Westpac fine, top left, was associated with aspects of exploitation of people. For the most part, these have almost become acceptable costs for big banks. Boohoo's a different case, of course. That's a UK online garment retailer who were the darling business of the lockdown in 2020 until July, when it was discovered they were buying garments in bulk from factories in the UK where there was exploited labour. And they're still not out of the woods, but they may become a very interesting use case for us to consider, because they have invested very heavily in remediating their supply chain environment. The jury is still out as to the effects of that remediation work, and they've had to invest an extraordinary sum of money to make it happen. But they appear to be in decent space now. So I'm very interested to monitor that process. It's one that I'd love for us to be able to replicate more widely. But we need to change this sense, and we're talking to every one of those financial institutions on the screen. Financial institutions are a big part of what we all need to do going forward. So what do? We collect stories of trafficking from multiple sources, and Henry will describe this and demonstrate this with the hub very shortly. But this slide just is an indication of how our model works. Every journey into trafficking starts somewhere and finishes somewhere. And that journey is a myriad set of data points that, if we pull it all together in one place in a very accessible analysis, offering insights and opportunities for groups of every description to use that analysis to do their work more effectively, whether that's working with businesses and finance, whether that's research, whether that's rescue and rehabilitation, or law enforcement work. There are clues in this data when you pull it together that take you places that you would not have easily been able to get to before. It makes us more effective. These are flights, of course, and you can see that the airports are where there's the brightest hotspots, but bright hotspots are what are available for you to see, both in terms of recruitment and exploitation. Why are we called Traffik Analysis Hub? We're named after a program that was run during World War II at the Bletchley Park Code Breaking Centre in the UK, where they were monitoring radio signals in Europe and using that analysis to help direct our military response. We're doing just the same thing, the same idea. We stole the name to. And I'm just including this for you because I think it demonstrates how a story of trafficking, suitably anonymized, we're not looking in any way to put a survivor at risk. So this is a survivor story, depersonalized, and we've placed it in a head. It's a couple of paragraphs, but when you look at, you know, how this breaks down, you've got some really useful intel here. The yellow stuff helps us understand how the thing works. The red stuff are clues that might actually prompt an investigation or assist an investigation, be it financial or law enforcement. It helps, I think, break down how we're going about this work and how we need to accelerate this work with the not-for-profit world. We're still on a journey to convince the anti-trafficking NGO world that works particularly with survivors that this is a worthwhile thing to do. Unsurprisingly, data is precious, and we need to look after it well. I think we've proved that we have the integrity and the security to do that, but we need to take more of you with us on this journey. This is very much what the power of 10 and that together is stronger a piece of work is looking to deliver. I initially thought in 2007 that we could just get law enforcement to be better at what they do. In 2010, Stop the Traffic encouraged me to take some time out and go and work with some partner survivor organizations in India. And I spent some time with a group of survivors, hearing their stories and watching them be retrained to be economically sustainable in their own right post-exploitation. It was at that point in 2010 that I realized that the world was missing a trick by not listening to their stories carefully enough. Survivor stories, when brought together, need to be the fuel that changes policy and practice at every level, supranational level, government level, business, law enforcement, NGO. We all need to respond to the drivers that are contained in those stories. It took almost 6 years after that visit in 2010 to get sufficient momentum behind this project for IBM, Corporate Social Responsibility, who I hasten to add have been brilliant partners. to come along and invest in building this thing. That began in this time in 2017 when a senior solution architect called John McGrath pulled us all together. That was law enforcement, NGOs, business and banking, and academics in London for 3 days to try and scope what a platform like Traffik Analysis Hub would look like. And since that time, they've invested a lot of money in building the platform that you're going to see. They are still engaged, but they are no longer paying bills. Traffik Analysis Hub now has to stand on its own 2 feet, and we've become, in the last 2 years, an intelligence community of extraordinary proportions. A really diverse group of NGOs, businesses, academia and law enforcement, and the first supranational organisations who have signed a participation agreement, a contract, to use the data appropriately and to be accountable. There are now between 80 and 90 organisations actively engaged in this community. Hundreds of analysts around the world in every continent using the platform to inform their work. We don't make any charge to access Traffik Analysis Hub to NGOs, to academics or to law enforcement. We do ask for a subscription fee from businesses and financial institutions. And we're happy, of course, to talk to any of you post this time. So please look at our website, which will have our the various documents that you'll need to look at in order to join our initiative, and we're open for business for conversations. This is our collaboration model. That's our logo at the center, and it's a series of overlapping circles. We don't want to tell you how to do your work, but we do want you to draw on the best information available in order to inform how you step forward. And we think that these 3 statements apply routinely. From our analysis, we know that business and commerce have got a disproportionate ability to change the face of trafficking in every way, even the businesses that rent out properties to sex work businesses. All of that, every penny from trafficking, when it hits a bank, is money laundering. We need to do more with that statement. We know that some business sectors are disproportionately vulnerable. We need to identify those and work harder there. And we know that hotspot data and typologies, when shared well, will change the sense of risk to traffickers and will help all stakeholders do better. This is the value proposition for business. I'm not going to labour it. I'm happy to share this. And of course, this has been recorded by our colleagues at the Mekong Club. This is our public website. The third partner in this initiative is the global law firm, Clifford Chance, who again have provided all of the legal support in terms of constructing the not-for-profit and how it works, but also advising on data privacy, which of course is not a single solution across the world. It needs to be nuanced to meet different data privacy environments, which we have done effectively, and we are just about to take our next significant step on data privacy and work more broadly with some actors. And this is the point in time when I hand the ball to Henry, who's going to talk you very quickly through our data processing tool chain, so you get a sense of where we get our data and how we process it. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Neil. So I'll just go through this slide, which shows where we get our data from and what we do with it, and then I'll go into a demo of the hub itself. So on the left-hand side, we have the discover phase. So this is where our data comes from. At the top, we have subject matter expert data. So this data is primarily from NGOs who are working usually in rescue or prevention. So we say it's our highest quality data. It's often collected directly from survivors, so it's really high quality survivor stories. By its nature, it tends to be fairly low in volume, so we add to this with AI source data. So our two main sources are IBM Watson Discovery News and Google's exploitation datasets. Both of these are large datasets of open source news stories. So here we look for relevancy and accuracy and bring in information from those news stories to add to our dataset. We also monitor some social media feeds. So when analyzing social media, there's a lot of noise, but we follow some trusted accounts who we know to be posting relevant and accurate information and bring in information from there too. And then we also have some open source intelligence data. So this is things like businesses of interest or parts of infrastructure, anything that can add context to the stories of trafficking that we're looking at. The next phase is the enrichment phase. And the job here is to get data from a variety of different sources. Some of it is completely unstructured, so it's just text. Some of it is structured, but in a variety of different ways with different classifications, different categories. And our job is to bring that into one unified, structured and enriched data set. The way that we do this is firstly with the TAH classification handler. So here we're using natural language understanding to extract information from the information that we've been given, but in the format that we need it. So what we're looking at here is trafficking type and subtype, and then recruitment and coercion methods. We look at any transportation method that might have been used on somebody's journey, and we also look at demographic information about the people involved. So that is genders, nationalities, and ages of both traffickers and victims. We also have a location handler. So the task here is to find the names of places within the information we've been given, find out where in the world those places are, and find out where in somebody's story of trafficking those places appear. So it could be where they started, so a source point, a transit point along the way, a destination, or it could be where somebody's been arrested, for example. And all of this information, once we've got it all together, it's all stored securely in the cloud and is delivered to users via the Traffik Analysis Hub. So the main view is a map analysis view, which is a geospatial representation of the data we have. We also have a dashboard which shows a kind of simplified country level overview, as well as summary statistics. And then we have a visual insights tool which is used for exploring news stories. We also have a GitHub repository, so if we have tech-minded analysts, we're able to collaborate on code through our GitHub repository, and we also have a Slack channel which can be used for messaging us or the development team, and also the rest of the user community. We can all be contacted using Slack. So collaboration is something that's really important to us. We want to have as many people involved and as much data, but we also are building a really engaged, active user community. So I will go into the hub. So we should see the Traffik Analysis Hub. So this is a map view. This is what you'll see when you log in. When you log in, the first thing that you can do is filter the data. So there's a couple of ways that we can do that. I've got it filtered to show about the last year of data. So along the bottom, you can filter by time, you can get narrower, and you can go further back. We can also filter by data source. So at the moment, we're looking at NGO incident reports and news reports that have been classified by us. But you can, if you're only interested in one of the data sources, you can turn off the others. You can also filter by country. So if you're looking at specific geography, you can do that. And you can filter by any of these categories that we extracted earlier. So things like trafficking type and subtype, victim nationality, coercion method, anything. That means that if you're looking at a specific typology, you can really narrow it down and only see on the map what is useful for you. The way the data is visualized at the moment is clustered markers. So each one of these circles with a number in, the number represents a collection of stories of trafficking. If I zoom in, let me zoom in on Taiwan. As we zoom in or out, the clusters get more or less granular. and eventually we get down to individual points. See here we've got a cluster in Taiwan. What we can do here, so each one of these markers represents an individual story or article about trafficking, and if we click on one we can see a bit more information about this story. So here we've got the report location is Taiwan, the location type is it's an arrest location, and the trafficking type is child sexual exploitation. So the data source for this is a news story that we have classified ourselves, and we've got the URL title here, Lonely and Online, How Predators Sexually Exploit Children Through Social Media. So if we want to know a bit more information, because it's a news story, we have a link to that news story, so we can click here. And it will take us to the original news story, so we can get a bit more information from here. And we can also click on Show Details. And this will tell us a bit more information about the incidents that we're looking at. So here we can, the first thing that we can see at the top is the confidence that our algorithms have in the accuracy of their classifications. So we can see at the top that it's 100% sure this is a story about child sexual exploitation. And down here we have some more of the information about things that have been extracted during the natural language understanding process. So here we've got victim gender, location source, location arrests, also investigating agencies. So it's a quick way of just learning a little bit more about the individual incident that we're looking at. If I zoom slightly further out. So there are some other ways that we can visualize the data. So we can look at the data as intensity heat maps. So if I zoom further out, here we can see where we're seeing clusters of cases within our filter. Again, as we zoom in and out, it gets more or less granular, but this is good for showing kind of hotspots where we're seeing more cases. And we can also look at the data as choropleths. So let me just bring it down. So choropleths are similar to intensity heat maps, but we're able to look at the data at a country level. So here within this filter, so I've just gone for about a month last summer, and then you can see within this filter, it shades each country by how many incidents we have within it. So we can see here, we're seeing a large amount in India, we're seeing quite a lot in China, Germany, UK, USA, Nigeria, the kind of hotspots we're seeing there. One feature that we're in the process of rolling out at the moment is going down one more level. So at the moment, this works for the USA and Canada. So we're able to go down to state level in both USA and Canada, and this we're rolling out across the world. So some of the feedback that we're getting from users, particularly in larger countries like the USA, is that it's not particularly useful to just look at it at a country level. They want to be able to go lower. So here we're able to see in America the specific states where we're seeing higher levels. We can also overlay information from the TIP report, so the Trafficking in Persons report. So this is this rates countries, allocates them to tiers on the basis of their response to trafficking. And so here we're able to overlay this on the map, which gives us a quick view of a kind of risk analysis of countries. Here we're looking at 2019, but we can go all the way back to 2012. One thing I missed out on actually, let me zoom back in, I'll go back to Taiwan. So I mentioned earlier that we can add businesses of interest, so things that can add context to the stories of trafficking that we're looking at. So here, when we've zoomed in, we can add, it's things, either businesses that are particularly high risk, things like beauty parlors, massage parlors, strip clubs, also things that are likely to be used by traffickers or victims, so hotels, banks, ATMs, and also infrastructure, mostly around transport, so things like primary roads, bus stations, train stations. We can add docks, we have banks on. anything that can add context. So if we're seeing a cluster in a certain place, we can have a look at what's in the local area. We can see which, if we know that they've traveled by train, we can see which train stations are nearby, see which roads are likely to have been used, and start to build a kind of wider picture of the context around the story. If I zoom back out again, and there's one more way of visualizing the data that I want to show you. So the next way is route maps. So route maps are our way of showing movement among the data. So we know there's often movement either across borders or within borders when it comes to trafficking. So I'm just going to bring up the last few years of NGO data and then turn on route maps. So here the pink dots represent destinations, and the blue dots represent destinations, and the pink dots represent sources. If I click on one, I can show you what we're doing. So here we've got the Philippines as a source. So this is just within the last few years of NGO data. We've got movement from the Philippines. I'll zoom out because it goes all over the world. So we've got USA, UK, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, all over Asia, both wider and closer. So it looks like down into Malaysia and Singapore. So we can see here that this looks like it's a kind of really strong source country. So there's movement from the Philippines all over the world. If I choose one of those countries, so Singapore, we have movement from Singapore. So this is movement into Singapore. We're seeing movement in from Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines again, Bangladesh. So here we can see that Singapore is a very strong kind of source country. We're seeing movement in from a variety of different places over Asia. So this is our way of
country, Henry, not source country, it's a destination.
Destination country, really strong destination country. So we can see, yes, it's a nice way of seeing movement and connections between countries, the kind of relationships that we need to look at. So often if we're just looking at one geography, it's connected to lots of other places. It's a global problem. One thing that you can do here is click create a report. So when you've got a view that's interesting to you, you click create a report and it will take you to the analysis register. So this is where we store analysis that's been done within the hub or by users or indeed external analysis. So what you can do here is you can add your own pictures, files, text, analysis, anything that can add to the work or the research that you've been doing. This is all also searchable, so this is another way that we really encourage collaboration. So we can see in here, if you're doing analysis into a particular country, you can search, see if anybody's working on something similar. Just on this front page, we've got financial records analysis, we've got analysis in Delhi traffic, Bangladesh, India, variety of different pieces of analysis. So this is a really great way of seeing who else is working on something similar, seeing if you can collaborate, or seeing if you can just learn very simply from what it is that they've been doing. So we also have a news explorer. So the news explorer is used for looking at news stories and finding links between them. So what this does is it searches by default for human trafficking, but you can narrow down the search within this box and it will return a collection of news stories. So here, if I click on one, here we've got one about an American church pastor and a coach arrested in a sex trafficking sting. This automatically extracts the names of locations, organizations, people, companies, and concepts. And on this network graph, the news stories are charted as pink dots and the entities that have been extracted are charted as blue dots. And there's connections drawn between them. So if I click on one, Florida, for example, so this is a story about Florida, we're then able to look at other news stories related to Florida. So this works for any of the locations, people, companies, concepts. So it's a nice way of jumping between news stories, finding related articles, and perhaps finding connections, connection between stories and incidents. We also have the Red Flag Accelerator linked to here. So this is developed by a partner organisation, Red Compass, who are based in London, and they are a financial crime consultancy. And this is a downloadable list of typologies for recognising and identifying human trafficking in for financial institutions. So it might be suspicious transactions or suspicious interactions. And this we offer to the financial institutions who sign up to the hub. We have a dashboard too. So this is a simplified view of the data. So this can be used for, again, a kind of a quick country risk analysis. It's all filterable by data source and by time, and it shows the data by country and by trafficking type. Again, it's all filterable. And it will also show you, once you've filtered, a number of summary statistics at the bottom. So kind of a quick way of gaining some insights down here. And then finally, we have a metrics page, which is about the hub itself, which is, so it shows the number of organizations we have signed up, the number of incidents, users, and again, some summary statistics just about the data in the hub itself. So I think that's everything from the hub. Neil, shall I pass back to you?
Thank you, Henry. Just to say, everybody, that we're still a work in progress. We have an Elasticsearch facility coming on stream very shortly, which is another remarkable way of visualizing the data in very helpful ways, particularly offering country or regional analysis of trends and a bunch more stuff besides. Happy to pick up your questions. I see Matt's on screen. Over to you, dear fellow.
Well, let me just thank Neil and Henry for a great presentation. You know, I used to work for USAID, and during the time that I was there, we once developed a proposal whereby we were going to develop a data analysis hub. And we wrote the proposal and we refined it and tried to improve it. And I always had in my mind that this was like one of those James Bond movie where the villain had all the blinking lights and the maps and everything else. It didn't go through because at that time, the technology to do that didn't exist, but now it does. And so all of the things, the bells and whistles and everything that you see related to this amazing tool allows for artificial intelligence and analysis and data visualization to take place in a way that we move away from data just being data that often in a lot of NGO offices is papers in a binder or something to an analysis that allows us to understand trends and you know, the direction that things are going in and what do we need to do in order to kind of prioritize our response, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're at a place where we have the potential to be a lot smarter, a lot more impactful, a lot more strategic, and it's as a result of this type of tool. The other thing that I want to say is that a lot of organizations talked about wanting to do something like this, but as far as I'm concerned, this is the one that's furthest along, most mature, most kind of inputs in terms of the data, in terms of the thinking and the analysis and everything else. And so that's the reason why we joined up with TA Hub, the Noble, Stop the Traffic, and we're basically working with them. There is something that I just wanted to mention to those of you who are on this call. In June, mid-June, we're going to have an event where we're going to ask organizations that have data to come together, to sit down, to go into more detail of how data can be used and to try to get organizations to commit data. We'll have an event mid-June, we'll have another one in September and another one in December. And the idea is to make the case, to demonstrate the utility, the potential outcome, how this could be used by organizations so that the basic community of organizations realize that perhaps Just having your own data by itself is worthwhile, but if we were able to pool it and analyze it and put it in a repository that really allows us to really make a difference, we get so much more from that. And I always look at this 1 + 1 = 11 instead of 2, when we are able to really consolidate all of our data in one. So anyone who's interested in joining this process, send us an email from this webinar. The recording of this is available. If you want to share this with others, go ahead and do that. With that, I'm going to stop and hand it over to Henry and Neil again to continue with questions and answers. But I just want to once again congratulate them and say that it's an amazing tool, and we're very, very excited about your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. So open to questions, folks. Just to sort of lay the ground, we don't have strong pickup in Southeast Asia, Australasia, and we'd love to have additional conversations with folks in that area. I appreciate that the global clock sometimes gets in the way of that. What questions would you have of us? There's one just come into the chat. The fourth part of the global problem slide is creating and maintaining demand for products and services. How does Hub pick up with this? Okay, so we need to understand from the data what that demand looks like and what those vulnerable businesses are and how they intersect with trafficking and exploitation, both physically and financially, and then use that analysis to get out to the businesses that matter. So conversations that we're having at the moment with the travel industry, with organizations like booking.com, and we're hoping to have with Airbnb, as people who have financial systems with the clues in. If we can pattern the activity and understand how trafficking and exploitation manifests itself in those records, the analysis that we can produce can help those industries begin to take additional measures, either to report potential bad actors in suspicious activity reports. They're a regulated business in that respect and need to do that. But it's about giving everybody in this environment, particularly those NGOs that are engaged in training programs with businesses and business sectors around the world, just more ammunition to shape their conversations with those businesses and industries. Thanks for the question, it's a good one. Another one, do we have links with researchers looking to link human trafficking with modern slavery and business, forced slavery? Yes, we absolutely do. We have an emerging ability to bring a company's supply chain data into a repository in the hub and have it essentially cross-matched with the risk picture that's available from hub data, and come up with a Sankey diagram that essentially risk codes your supplier network and indicates where you might want to consider conducting audit as a priority, and perhaps what questions you might need to ask. How much cooperation there really is with law enforcement agencies and local authorities to share the data, and what safeguards are there that the information gathered is not abused. So we have an internal audit program, so we are able to understand what data is accessed by who and when. So we have an investigative capacity if we require it. Each participant signs a contract which makes them responsible to use the data only in particular ways. Now, I appreciate, of course, that not everybody observes the rules, so we need to manage that environment carefully. But we do undertake due diligence around the organisations that join us. We do have some now 11 major global businesses, in mostly financial organisations, who have signed up and joined. Interpol globally are using it, and we're in very advanced conversations with a number of other law enforcement institutions of global influence. That includes Europol, Department of Homeland Security in the States, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada, and the National Crime Agency in the UK, as well as Scotland Yard and Greater Manchester Police. We've already got some local state US agencies on board. It's a developing program. We're very small as a group of people, and we need to grow organically with you rather than become another IBM. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up. If we were looking at modern slavery in the Indonesian palm oil industry, would that be possible? Yes, it would. I think the Elasticsearch piece that's just coming on stream will be particularly interesting in that regard. I looked at the development area recently and plotted over the last few years how the exploited labour in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand particularly had begun to change to accommodate many more people from Rohingya backgrounds. I thought that was a particularly interesting development. And of course, we do work with organisations like Liberty Shared, who've been very active in terms of highlighting errant palm oil plantation businesses to the authorities as engaging in exploited labour practices and getting their product the subject of seize and detain orders at ports. All of these tools, I think, help shift the ground. The questions have begun to dry up. I was doing so well. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, I see we've got 5 minutes left. Alana, our communications lead, put our admin email address in the chat earlier. You can find our website, trafficanalysis.org, and we'd love to develop a conversation with any or all of you. Thank you for your time today. And Matt, thanks for your partnership. I always feel a little intimidated when I'm on the same call with Matt because he's been in this business way longer than I have. I kind of feel like a bit of an imposter, still trying to prove myself.
Actually, I'm going to ask you one last question, just to round off the discussion. In the best of circumstances, what could this tool look like in 5 years and how would the world benefit?
I think in 5 years' time, if it continues to prosper with a small p, that it will not only be an anti-trafficking tool set, because the concept applies equally to other crime type areas that are of global concern. I think it would work extraordinarily well around wildlife and wildlife product trafficking. I think it would work extraordinarily well around counterfeit products and the manufacture of those. And both those areas have overlaps with trafficking and exploitation. I think it has the potential to be the kind of bright light that we've always wanted to expose the issue, so that everybody can see trafficking and exploitation as it is, as it lives in and around us, where frankly it hides very comfortably in plain sight. I think it truly has that ability to be the antidote to the problem. I don't think we'll ever make it go away, because people can't stop themselves abusing other people. But we have the ability to truly disembowel it as a commercial equation. And I hope I live long enough to see that.
You know, I just remember participating in a raid for wildlife trafficking products. I think it was rhino horn, and it happened to be at a brothel. And so the police went in there and they were looking for the rhino horns, and they found them, and right next to them were 13-year-old trafficking victims that they didn't pay any attention to because they went in for that particular crime. And it points out the fact that criminals franchise and do multiple things. So I think that point is well taken. So thank you very much, all of you who attended this. Thank you, Henry and Neil and Phoebe and Kat, for helping us to make this work. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to Neil or Henry. We really do feel like if we have more data, we have more of an understanding of what it is that is needed in order to address this issue. And to put that into perspective, as Neil said, very few people are being helped out of modern slavery. Out of the 40 million that are out there, we can do much better, and this is one way of ensuring that that happens. So with that, thank you very much. If anyone wants a copy of the recording or anything else related to this, let us know. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thank you, Mekong Club, for putting this together.
Thank you.